In a time long forgotten, before empires rose and fell, before men named the stars and charted the seas, when the earth was still young and the sky closer to the ground, there was a town in Yorubaland where spirit and mortal shared the same path. This land, veiled by the thin mist that separated the seen from the unseen, was sacred. Among its many treasures was this town unlike any other, known as Ìlú Aráyé, the City of Beings. It was not a city built upon conquest or riches, but one whose soul called for something deeper, the living presence of the spirit beings. This was a place where the spirits did not dwell far from the people, but walked alongside them like friends and family. It was said that the veil between the living and the spirits was as thin as a whisper, so that in the cool breeze you could almost hear the voices of ancestors calling through the trees. The people of Ìlú Aráyé were unlike any others, strong and wise, not because they had conquered kingdoms or had riches, but because they lived in harmony with the forces of nature and the spirits that walked among them. Their lives were shaped by two mighty beings. This town thrived not because of power or material wealth, but because it was guarded, cherished, and shaped by two mighty spirits. These were not distant gods, imagined in the smoke of incense or feared from stone altars. No, these spirits walked among the people. They touched earth, they intervened, they protected and demanded. They were not deities made by imagination, but forces embodied. The City of Beings was named not merely for the humans within it, but for these spirits who shaped its destiny. The first of these great spirits was Orokin, known as the spirit of thunder and truth. Orokin was a spirit that lived high above, in the skies where the clouds gathered and storms were born. His home was atop the mighty mountain, Ìlú Aráyé, where lightning flashed across the heavens like fireflies in the night. His presence was felt in the roar of thunder and the crack of lightning. He was a god of justice and truth. When Orokin spoke, his voice was like a storm, and his words were law. The people loved him dearly. When judgment was needed, they swore by Orokin's name, for they knew that no truth could hide from the power of his storm. Orokin did not come gently. His presence was a declaration of justice, of divine retribution, of power harnessed for protection. When Orokin moved, the skies shuddered. When he spoke, mountains trembled. His arrival was always accompanied by the beating of drums in the heavens and the flashing tongues of lightning across the sky. From his throne atop Ìlú Aráyé, the towering mountain that pierced the very clouds, he watched over the people with eyes like molten silver and a voice like roaring storm. Orokin was justice given form. He struck down tyrants and shielded the weak. Under his cloud, no lie could survive. His followers knew him not just through stories, but through lived experience. His judgments were final, his protection unwavering. The mountain people and his priests draped in red and white lived in devotion. They would gather at his shrine. They built his shrines, a great altar from stone and bronze, surrounded by sacred drums known as bata. Their priests danced with bata drums. These drums echoed across the land, calling on the spirit of thunder to bring rain to the fields and protect the people, and every law, every oath, was sealed in his name. Orokin's rituals were dramatic and fierce. His priests had to climb to the highest peak of Ìlú Aráyé during a storm and shout their truths into the wind. Only then were they considered worthy. His priests were not only spiritual leaders, but also judges, warriors, and peacemakers. Children were trained to recite chants of power, to face the world with boldness, and speak truth even when it was dangerous. Deep beneath the earth, beneath roots and soil and stone, dwelled a second power, Àfìtọ, the god of flame, silence and secrets. Unlike Orokin, he did not announce himself. He did not split the skies. Àfìtọ was not loud or fierce. He was quiet, ever watchful and mysterious. His realm was one of deep shadows, where rivers of fire whispered forgotten secrets and kept the old stories alive. Àfìtọ whispered. He lived in the hidden heart of the earth, in a place called Fon, where rivers of fire flowed like thoughts in a dream. To know Àfìtọ was to embrace the mystery of life, the bond of family, the strength in quietness. Àfìtọ is a keeper of traditional secrets. His fire did not destroy, it warmed, it remembered, it connected. His fire did not burn away, it preserved. It was through his fire that the people remembered who they were, who their ancestors were, and where they came from. His people, the cave-dwellers, wore ash-grey and worshipped in shadows. Àfìtọ's followers worshipped him in the silence of the caves, wrapped in ash-grey cloth. They did not dance in the storm like Orokin's followers. Instead, they hummed soft chants around the flickering flames, honoring the memories of their ancestors. Àfìtọ was the spirit of warmth and protection, a keeper of traditions and secrets. Àfìtọ's songs were not sung aloud but hummed deep in the chest. Àfìtọ taught them that safety is not always found in confrontation, but in closeness, in keeping, in holding. He did not demand spectacles. He asked for loyalty, for silence, and for memory. The fire rituals of Àfìtọ were centered on storytelling and sacred silence. Every elder was a flamekeeper, preserving the histories of families and the truths behind traditions. In his domain, nothing was forgotten and nothing was ever spoken in vain. His influence ran through lullabies, recipes, burial rites, and wedding chants. The people of Ìlú Aráyé were blessed by both Orokin and Àfìtọ. They were free to choose which spirit to follow. Some climbed the mountain to call upon Orokin, to feel the crackling energy of the storm and the power of justice. Others descended into the caves to seek the quiet warmth of Àfìtọ's flame, to find comfort in his silence and the preservation of memory. Both ways were sacred, and the people lived in peace. And so, Ìlú Aráyé thrived. The town flourished in this harmony. They carved wood, sang songs of praise, and raised children who grew up without fear, for they knew they were protected by their mighty gods. The people were not divided by these gods, but enriched. Some families raised their children under Orokin's storm. Others taught them to walk softly in the ways of Àfìtọ. They coexisted not as rivals, but as dual expressions of the sacred. The children played at mimicking lightning and smoke. The town knew peace, not because it had no challenges, but because its spirit was balanced. The people did not fear their gods. They lived with them. Each year, the city held a dual celebration called Ojuatiina, the Day of Thunder and Flame, when both gods were honored together. The sky would light up with storms, and the fires would burn bright, but the people knew no fear, for they had learned to live with both. For one day, the city was split down the middle. One side was filled with drums, dancing, and challenges of strength. The other, hushed stories, fire dances, and ritual feasts eaten in contemplative silence. But peace, like all precious things, invites envy. From beyond the great rivers, beyond the lands of light, there came a fierce tribe known as the Kubarani. These warriors wore black armor and carried poisoned blades that could cut through the strongest shields and fire torches. Their faces were hidden behind bronze masks, and they spoke no language that could be understood. They were like shadows, swift and deadly, and they came with fire and iron, leaving destruction in their wake. They did not seek parley. They came as shadow, swallowing all. The Kubarani came to Araye town with one goal, to conquer. They burned the fields, desecrated the shrines, and spilled the blood of the innocent. Shrines were defiled, children taken, crops burned. The ground, once sacred, was stained with blood. The town trembled under their onslaught. Fear gripped the hearts of the people. They were caught between terror and faith, turned to the only power they know, and they cried out for help to their gods. The elders of Ìlú Aráyé gathered in the town square, beneath the sacred tree, to decide what must be done. Elder Adifagba, wisest among them and old, spoke gravely. The Kubarani have come to destroy us. We must call upon our protectors. Each family must choose the path their spirit answers to. Let the gods answer with the strength they offer. And so the people divided. Half of the town ran to the mountain of Arai to call upon Orokin, the storm spirit. Orokin, rain down your fury, defend us. They cried as they climbed the steep slopes of the mountain, their voices rising to the heavens. The other half of the town descended into the caves of Kotafon, where the flame spirit Àfìtọ waited. Àfìtọ, bind us, protect us. Let us disappear into your memory, they whispered as they sought refuge in the shadows of the caves. Orokin heard the cries of his people and was the first one to answer. He descended like a mighty tempest. His thunder cracked open the sky, and lightning danced like angry spirits. With his arrival, the very earth seemed to shake, and the Kubarani, though fierce, could not withstand the storm. Orokin's voice rumbled. No harm shall touch those who walk beneath my clouds. My storm shall shield them. The people, armed with Orokin's power, became warriors of lightning. They learned to wield thunder in battle and to chant in unison with the storm. With each blow, they struck down their enemies. Orokin protected them, but he also made them strong. He taught them that justice is not just a gift but a weapon, answered first. A tempest roared across the land. Lightning shattered trees and scorched enemy camps. Thunder became a war cry. Orokin himself stood among warriors, teaching chants that made spears blaze with energy. He gave not just shelter, but strength. He forged fighters. Meanwhile, in the caves, Àfìtọ moved like smoke. He whispered his protective words. He did not rage like Orokin. Instead, he wrapped his people in the thick smoke of his fires, making them invisible to the eyes of the invaders. The heat from his flame softened their footsteps, and Kubarani searched the town but could not find them. Their scent, their footprints, their very presence were gone. Àfìtọ fed them, warmed them, and bound them with stories. His protection was deep, but it came with a cost. In the silence of the caves, Àfìtọ spoke in soft murmurs. Remain here. The world above is broken and has forgotten you. I did not. You are safe below. Here, you are mine. Though the invaders could not see them, Àfìtọ did not free his followers. He kept them hidden deep in the caves, feeding them with sacred fire and guiding them with the language of silence and unity. But his protection came at a price. He asked for their loyalty, their obedience, and their complete devotion. The war did not end quickly. 9 long seasons passed, each one filled with hardship. Children were born in caves and on mountaintops. The people of Ìlú Aráyé grew in strength, and the people of Orokin became warriors. The people of Àfìtọ became memory keepers. They were not one town anymore. They were 2 hearts beating to different rhythms. Entire generations grew up knowing only thunder or silence. Oral traditions diverged. Languages twisted. What had been one people began to split in thought, value, and even name. The mountaintop folk became fierce and proud, while those below grew quiet and dependent on the memory of their protector's flame. The sky above and the earth below became different worlds, each with its own rules. But through it all, the gods never abandoned them. Orokin continued to rage in the skies, and Àfìtona's fire burned ever brighter. Though the people lived in fear and uncertainty, they knew their protectors would always be there, each in their own way. And so they held on to hope, waiting for the day when the storm. Years passed, and the memory of the caves began to fade for some of the people. Then one morning, the sky was still. There was no echo of drum, no smoke on the horizon. The Kubarani had vanished like a dream at dawn. The town, broken but breathing, emerged. From the mountain, Orokin descended. His voice thundered, stood before his people and said, "You are free. The storm is gone. Walk as kings, speak as free people, return, rebuild." And they did, and the people rejoiced. They danced, they sang, they wept. Joy poured down like rain. Songs rose from the soil. They climbed down, expecting a reunion, and embraced those who emerged from the earth. They met in the town center for the first time in years, old friends, long separated. They ran to their gods, while Orokin vanished into the clouds, leaving behind the sacred drums and a shrine for remembrance. But in the shadows, Àfìtona saw what has happened and did not release his people. "You are mine," he whispered. "I kept you alive. I fed you when all else failed. Why would you return to a world that abandoned you?" The people kept begging him, but Àfìtona spoke again. "Why return to a world that betrayed you?" he whispered. "I fed you. I warmed you. I sheltered you. You are mine. You owe me your souls." His grip tightened, and he summoned them deeper into the cave. His whispers turned to chains. Families begged, children screamed. And so some tried to escape the cave, only to vanish into the mist. Some begged, they were refused. A once beloved spirit had become a captor. The people outside watched in horror. The town of Unity had been split, not by war, but by love turned possession. The people declared, "A protector who frees shall be honored." But the savior who enslaves is no better than the enemy. From that day, the town was torn. Families split, some reunited in the open, others lost forever in darkness. Half the town celebrated life. They rebuilt markets, held festivals, praised Orokin, and carved new paths. The other half, lost, forgotten in the embrace of Àfìtona. Only a few escaped, speaking of strange rituals and being bound by memory itself, a magic of loyalty twisted into chains. Young Aderima, born on the mountaintop, cried out, "He was our guardian, not our master. No true god binds those who serve him." The townsmen declared a festival in honor of Orokin called Josin Fe, the worship of freedom. The people gathered in Ìlú Aráyé under open skies. They beat the batter drums for Orokin. They danced in the rain and sing, "Oluwa Orokin, who roared for us and let us go. We dance for you." They told their children, "Orokin fought for us and set us free. Àfìtona hid us and made us prisoners." The people declared, "The protector who frees is the one we shall forever honor. But the savior who enslaves is no better than the enemy we fled." Each year, at the first break of rain, they climbed Ìlú Aráyé. They danced in the downpour, barefoot on sacred rock. They beat the thunder drums of Orokin, not as plea or praise, but as remembrance. Slowly, Àfìtona's naded from the lips of children. Children were born in the dark and on the heights. Songs changed, faces aged. Peace was a memory passed like a bedtime tale. but the gods remained. Orokin strengthened the spirit of his people. Àfìtọ sustained the soul of his. Elders whispered warnings. Never follow fire into caves. Never answer the humming voice in the dark. And some say, even now, that the fire still burns in the deep, a lonely flame with no worshippers. But the thunder? The thunder still answers. And so, Ìlú Aráyé became more than a city. It became a story, a reminder that even gods must be questioned, and that love without freedom is but a beautiful chain. And in that story lives a truth as old as spirit itself. To protect is divine, but to set free is sacred. To this day, in Aráyé town and beyond, the people still tell the story of the two protectors. Shrines to Orokin still echo with thunderous drums. His name is called when rain is needed, when courage is tested, when storms rise. But Àfìto's name is only whispered, not in prayer, but in warning. Power is nothing if it does not free. A savior becomes a captor if he never lets go. And so ends the tale of the two spirits, one who gave strength and freedom, and one who gave protection, but kept the key. In life we must ask, do we serve the spirit that frees us, or the one that holds us tight? For even the safest cage is still a prison. Not all who protect you love you. Not all who save you will let you go. True power gives freedom, not fear. And thus began the era of remembrance. The Festival of Freedom blossomed into the heart of Ìlú Aráyé's calendar and had become custom. Children were named after thunder, and rainstorms were met with laughter and dance. New shrines rose to Orokin, simple, open, built from stone and sky. His worship had changed. No longer a god of fearsome judgment, he had become a symbol of release, of the right to live unbound. Aderem, now older, became a priestess not of Orokin, but of a new path. She taught that fire and silence were not to be feared but understood. Not all silence is captivity, she would say, and not all flame is control. She began gathering those who had escaped the caves, those marked by Àfìto's flame, and together they created a sanctuary at the edge of the old cave paths, calling it Orole Asha, the House of Meaning. But deep within Koto Fawn, Àfìto stirred. His silence was not forgetfulness. He had listened, he had remembered. And one day, the whispers returned. They didn't come as warriors or flame, they came as dreams. Children across Ìlú Aráyé began to sleepwalk. They wandered at night, muttering in languages their parents no longer spoke. They painted walls with ash and ember. They sang lullabies known only to the cave-born. At first it was dismissed as imagination, but then came the fire, small, controlled, and curiously sentient. Hearths reignited after being doused, lamps flickered without oil. Aderemi recognized the signs. He is reaching out, she told the council, not to conquer, to be remembered. And that stirred debate. Can a god change? Some believed Àfìto sought forgiveness. Others believed this was a trap. The high priests of Orokin warned, he held you once, he will not let go again. But Aderemi said, we must confront the past to shape the future. If we only worship freedom, we must also understand bondage. And so, with cautious hope, she led a procession toward the sealed cave, bearing not weapons, but stories. The caves of Koto Fawn still whispered in the dark. Few dared approaches, for they feared the fire that once bound their kin. But the caves never fully closed. A few, always a few, wandered too near. They returned with strange marks on their skin, dreams of ash-filled groves, and voices that echoed long after the lips had stilled. They called it the Flame's Pull. And one of those marked children was a boy named Kiki, born 3 generations after the war, a child of no special heritage, or so it seemed. He was drawn to silence. Where others played in the sun, Kiki sat by hearths and stared into coals. Where his friends sang festival songs, he hummed ancient tones that no one remembered teaching him. He saw symbols in smoke. He heard stories in the hiss of boiling pots. His grandmother, Yekenkimi, one of the last to escape Àfìtona's hold, he saw the signs. "He calls to you," she whispered one night, as thunder cracked gently overhead. "The fire remembers you." But Okiki wasn't afraid. He was curious. One night, as the stars blinked out behind gathering clouds, he followed the whispers to the edge of Koto Aforn. The mouth of the cave stood before him like a memory half forgotten. And there, in the hush of ember wind, a voice spoke, soft as breath, deep as earth. "You are not bound. You are chosen." Night after night he slipped from his home and followed a path of flickering embers, until at last he stood before the heart fire, a lone flame pulsing atop ancient stone. And there he found survivors, descendants of those who never left. Their eyes glowed with ember light. They bowed when he entered, not in fear, but in welcome. A tall girl with flame-bright eyes stepped forward. "You carry both storm and spark," she said. "Come, be the bridge between sky and shadow." And in the hush of the cave, Ikiki felt a promise kindle in his heart. Above ground, the elders worried. Ikiki stepped inside. Inside the cave, fire still danced, not wild, but alive. It lit no shadows, but revealed things buried in time. As Okiki walked, he saw carvings in the walls. Names, faces, stories. His fingers traced them as if he knew them. He passed through the old gathering halls where Àfìtona's followers once chanted in grey cloth and bowed in eternal silence. And then he reached the heart fire, a low flame pulsing softly atop a stone circle. And around it stood others, not spirits, not ghosts, but descendants. Children of those who had never left. They looked at Okiki, not as a stranger, but as kin. One, a tall girl with flame-colored eyes, stepped forward and said, "You are of both sky and ember. You carry the memory of fire and the freedom of storm. You are the bridge." Kiki spoke not a word, but the flame flickered in approval, and deep within, Àfìtona stirred. In the village above, the elders grew restless. The boy had vanished for 2 nights. There was no word of Kiki. Yeoshunketmi, herself once bound by Àfìtona's flame, wept at the base of Ìlú Aráyé, praying for thunder's mercy. But the skies stayed silent. Then the hearths in town, long cold, rekindled themselves, sending messages of curling smoke into the dawn. Few could read the cave glyphs, but Adaremi, grey-haired priestess of Orokin, saw these words in the haze. The flame remembers sorrow, but seeks not to shackle. It yearns to be known. A hush fell over the assembly. If the fire had changed, then perhaps the people must learn too. At last, on the 7th night, Okiki returned. He brought 5 cave-born children whose skin bore ash-white marks, each a map of memory. In the square he knelt before the flame circle, laid out carvings of ancestors, and kindled a small fire that cracked open vision. Àfìtona's sorrow, a lonely god watching his followers fade. The people's flight, faces turned skyward seeking storm. The hand of return, a child reaching from the cave toward light. Then he spoke. "The fire recalls our pain, but it wishes only to share its truth. Let us remember together." And the priests of Orokin, after breathless pause, agreed. If flame can change, so can we. The next morning, as dew glistened on banana leaves and the drums lay silent in anticipation, the elders, priests, and children of Ìlú Aráyé gathered in the town square. A space that had once held only one altar, a simple stone for Orokin open to the sky, now welcomed a second. It was Adaremi who laid the first stone of the new altar. Grey as ash, warm to the touch. "We will not rebuild the prison," she said, her voice thick with age and clarity. "We will not return to silence, but we will remember it." The townsfolk, skeptical but stirred, joined in the ritual. Children brought coals. Farmers offered bits of scorched wood from fields once burned. The cave-born, led by Hiki, stepped forward with carvings of ancestors never mourned, names never spoken above ground. They built it a low circle of stone that burned with no fuel, fed by memory alone. A second altar, not for worship, but for witness. And when both altars stood, the thunderstone and the flame circle, a hush fell over the square. Then the wind stirred, not fierce, not loud. A soft breeze touched the drums, a single drop of rain fell, and from the fire a gentle hiss answered. Thunder and flame, not warring, not hiding, just there, together. Life returned to the land, not as it was, but as it could be. Children were now taught both names, Orokin and Àfìtọ, not as enemies, not as heroes, but as forces, as truths. They learned that storms can protect and destroy, that flame can warm or consume, and that love, even divine love, must come without chains. The Festival of Freedom changed too. Where once the people danced only in the rain, now they lit lanterns at dusk, one for every name lost to the caves, every child born in darkness, every voice that never returned. And still, they danced. They danced in the open. They sang the name of Orokin, he who let us go, and whispered the name of Àfìtọ, he who now understands. Some nights, thunder rolled far in the distance, and the wind laughed through palm trees. Other nights, embers danced in hearths even after the flames had died. It was said both spirits still watched, but no longer as rivals. Kiki grew not into a priest, but something more ancient, a keeper of balance, a storyteller, a bridge. He walked both mountain and cave. He sat with elders and children, carrying with him a staff split in two. Lightning burnt wood on one side, scorched black on the other. In time, people sought him not for miracles, but for wisdom. He taught not with commands, but with questions. He asked, "What protects you without holding you? What warms you without demanding your soul? What would you worship if no God asked you to?" And in answering, the people of Ìlú Aráyé began to build a new faith, not of fear, not of duty, but of choice. And from choice came peace. Word of Ìlú Aráyé's harmony spread across the land. Envoys brought tapestries of lightning and ember entwined, seeds that thrived in sun and shadow, and hymns of both storm and flame. Orokin, now wisest of storytellers, would smile and say, "May your lives be like fields after rain and fire, lush with life, yet never scorched." And wherever thunder rolled or embers danced, people remembered the choice. Power may bless, but only freedom truly magnifies. One night, long after the Festival of Freedom had become a way of life, Kiki stood alone on Ìlú Aráyé. Rain touched his face. Beneath him, the village sparkled with firelight. He knelt at the thunderstone. His hand brushed its edge. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting us go." Then he walked to the flame circle, where a quiet warmth kissed his skin. He knelt again. "And thank you for learning." Behind him, a boy and a girl, twins born of cave-born and mountain-top, watched silently. Their eyes held both storm and ember. Their hands held each other. Kiki turned to them and smiled. "It is your world now." And in that moment, the wind and the fire bowed. And so, child, when you ask why we tell the tale of both Orokin and Àfìtọ, why our shrines are open to sky and lit by emberlight, it is because we remember, not just the gods, but the choice to walk away from chains, the choice to return when fire softens, the choice to forgive without forgetting. That is the way of Ìlú Aráyé. That is why we dance in the rain and light a lamp in the dusk. And if ever you hear thunder roll and feel a fire stir, do not fear. Just remember what Kiki taught us. All power must kneel to freedom, even the gods. A new dawn rose. At the twin altars, Tafok gathered to bear witness. They brought coals and battered relics from both mountain and cave. Adarem laid the first stone of the second altar, ash-grey and warm to the touch, and proclaimed, "We build not for worship, but for memory." With each stone set, the two altars, Thunderstone and Flame Circle, stood side by side. Then the wind sighed, and a single raindrop fell. The Flame Circle hissed back. Storm and spark at last, in gentle accord. From that day on, no ceremony claimed only storm or flame. Children were taught to bow first to the open sky, then to the quiet hearth. Pilgrims travelled from afar to see how Ìlú Aráyé honoured both forces without fear. The twin altars became a symbol, one to remind them of freedom's gift, the other to warn them of memory's weight. Seasons turned, and the festival of freedom grew richer. Lanterns burned at dusk, each inscribed with a name once lost to shadow. As drums sounded at dawn, a hush would pass through the crowd, so light it felt like prayer. And in that silence, they sensed two presences, a distant rumble, a faint crackle, as though Orokin and Àfìtọ lingered too, no longer as rivals but as silent watchers. Kiki grew into a keeper of balance. He never wore priestly robes but carried a staff twice forged, lightning black on one side, ember scorched on the other. He wandered village and cavern alike, asking simple questions. What protects without binding? What warms without demanding loyalty? What would you choose if no god asked you to? In answering, the people learned that true power bows to freedom. The sun rose over Ìlú Aráyé's rebuilt market with a soft glow, gilding new stalls of woven cloth, carved wood, and painted gourds. Merchants called out prices in harmonies rather than shouts. Children chased one another between pillars draped in streamers of red, white, and ash-grey. Yet even amid laughter, the memory of war lingered in small ways. A scarred baobab trunk near the central fountain, a faded mural where once stood smouldering ruins. At the edge of the square, the two altars, the Thunderstone and the Flame Circle, stood side by side, humming with quiet power. Here, the people traded not only goods, but stories. Travelers came from distant towns to marvel at how Ìlú Aráyé had learned to honor freedom and memory in tandem. It was said that if you listened closely, you could hear the faint rumble of thunder and the soft crackle of ember flame as you bartered for pottery or sampled spiced yam cakes. Among the crowd that morning was a young storyteller, Àfìtọ, who carried a bound scroll of parchment and ink. She had journeyed many leagues to collect tales of the town's transformation. Approaching the Thunderstone, she bowed respectfully and whispered, "Tell me, old stone, how did you survive the flames of war?" No answer came, yet as she pressed her palm flat, the stone's vibrations traveled into her fingertips. In her mind, she saw the faces of Orokin's warriors, the rhythm of their drums, and the moment each bolt of lightning shattered enemy lines. Then she turned to the Flame Circle. With equal reverence, she touched the cool ash surface. A warmth blossomed in her palm, weaving images of silent acolytes huddled in the caves, the hush of their songs, and the moment they first realized their protector's embrace had become a shackle. Yat smiled, tears in her eyes. "Both voices speak truth," she murmured, unfurling her scroll. "And now, both will live in my stories." That evening, under a sky painted in indigo and flickering starlight, the elders assembled in the Hall of Unifying Light, a circular chamber lined with lanterns. Here they invited Yato to read her scroll aloud. By the glow of oil lamps, she recited, Orokin's lightning forged the shield that saved us. Àfìto's flame carved our memory in ember. Each bore gifts and burdens, and from their clash we learned. A gift unloved can become a chain. A burden understood can become a bridge. As her voice rose and fell, the assembled crowd, priests, merchants, cave-born, mountaintop kin, felt unity in the cadence. When she finished, the chamber remained hushed, as though the words themselves were sacred coals, warming but never burning. Elder Adarami stood and spoke. Let this scroll be copied and shared in every home, so that no child forgets why we treasure choice, why we honor both thunder and flame. The hall erupted in applause, gentle, deliberate. Thus was born the Book of Two Voices, to be read each year alongside the Festival of Freedom. At the next Festival of Freedom, the market closed for a day, and the townspeople converged on Ìlú Aráyé before dawn's first light. They carried lanterns in one hand and drumsticks in the other. Children walked beside elders, and even the cave-born emerged wrapped in ash-dyed cloaks, their faces alight with anticipation. At sunrise, two processions began. From the east, under a rising sun, came the drummers of Orokin. Their red and white garb shimmered against the sky. From the west, down a hidden ravine, emerged the choir of Àfìtọ. They wore ash-grey robes and carried lanterns whose flames danced with blue sparks. The processions met at the twin altars. In a moment of perfect silence, Yato stepped forward to read an excerpt from her scroll. When storm and flame meet, they do not quench one another. They transform the world into rain that nourishes and warmth that heals. Then the drums thundered. The lanterns glowed. The crowd lifted their voices in a new hymn, neither solely storm nor solely flame, but a harmony of both. And for the first time in memory, the festival lasted from dawn until the third star appeared at nightfall. Drums and lanterns accompanied song, dance, and feasting, weaving a tapestry of light and sound that carried the town's story into everyone's heart. In the market's bustle, one could still hear thunder and flame. Traders wove cloth in red, white, and ash-grey. Potters stamped lightning bolts beside ember motifs. A traveling scribe named Yato felt the stones hum beneath her fingers, first thunderstone, then flame circle, and knew both stories would live on in her scrolls. In the days that followed, travelers wrote home of Ìlú Aráyé's remarkable transformation. Envoys arrived bearing gifts, woven tapestries depicting combined symbols of lightning and ember, seeds of crops that thrived in both sun and shadow, and liturgy for new ceremonies. And at the heart of it all was the understanding that memory and freedom must walk hand in hand. Parents taught children to read from the Book of Two Voices by candlelight. Storytellers like Yato traveled far and wide, carrying tales that reminded distant peoples of the power and peril of divided hearts. Orokin, now old and revered, would sometimes appear at gatherings. He never sought attention, but when he spoke, people listened. In his thin voice he would say, "May your spirits be like the fields after rain and fire, flooded with life, yet never scorched." And with that benediction, he would vanish into the crowd, leaving behind a hush of wonder. Centuries passed. Dynasties rose and fell. The world beyond Yorubaland changed in ways no one could have imagined. Yet every year, on the day when thunder and flame intertwine in the sky, the people of Ìlú Aráyé remember. They light lanterns, they beat drums, They open their hearts to both storm and ember, and most of all to the choice between them. And storytellers, wherever they wander, still recite the final lines of the Book of Two Voices. Let no power, divine or mortal, shackle your will. Let no memory, bright or dark, blot out your freedom. For in thunder and in flame we learn, the mightiest gift is the right to choose. Thus the folk tale lives on, in fire and storm, in story and song, for all who hear its call. I hope you enjoy the story. If so, click on the like button and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. See you in the next video. Bye!